This is the Tree of Life, Season 20, Chapter 1. In this episode, we will be talking about how distinct bodily rhythms impact the health of a person. To begin, there are two forms of bodily rhythm or cycle: those which are affirmational, such as the sexual and sleep cycle, which maintain their regularity and health through reverse substitution events, and those which are negational, such as the urination cycle or digestive cycle, which maintain their regularity and health through substitution events simpliciter. To reiterate, substitution events are those in which the self-representation remains anchored to the vessel, but the perceived objects of consciousness are not the same as those contextual to the vessel. In other words, there is a disconnect between the perceived objects and those contextual to the vessel, although the self-representation remains anchored to the vessel. These are events where negation occurs at the beginning of the event, resulting in infinite recursion, leading to sublimation and verbalization at the conclusion, followed by a flipping of phase. Substitution events can be centered around a particular bodily rhythm or cycle, such as the inhibition of the desire to eat or drink. Substitution events are terminated by structural adjustments, such as displacement mirroring, which involves the flipping of the negation to affirmation for another structure member. Substitution events tend to eliminate path convolution resulting from infinite recursion from path parsimony. This occurs by the erasure of the past associated with those convoluted paths. Nevertheless, within those outside the substitution event, time parsimony prevails, meaning that all those events corresponding to infinite recursion occurred within that timeline. Thus, path parsimony isolates the consciousness from the expression which occurred during those convoluted paths. Reverse substitution events, on the other hand, represent situations where acquiescence is followed by negation. In this case, the objects of consciousness and self-representation are both divorced from the vessel. In reverse substitution events, we see the flow of a consciousness from vessel to vessel, from location to location, and depending upon whether the reverse substitution is the result of hierarchical or tautological natural law, and the central objects fixed or unfixed. Whereas path parsimony in a substitution event erases past actions pursuant to expression, path parsimony in reverse substitution events erases future actions pursuant to recurrence. Now, to develop a holistic application of the interrelation of the bodily cycles or rhythms to these two types of substitution event, it becomes necessary to distinguish, as I said, between those cycles whose health is assured by regulation of expression without integration, that is manifesting as deferral, and those cycles whose health is assured by regulation of expression with integration, that is recurrence. Thus, negational cycles are those which must be deferred by substitution events, that is expression without integration, to maintain a healthy cycle. Affirmational cycles are those which must be stimulated by reverse substitution events, that is expression by an incoming consciousnesses during the event, for recurrence. The distinction between these two forms of cycle largely relates to whether the cycle is relationally self-conscious or self-conscious by need. Thus, in the case of an affirmational cycle, recurrence of the impulse occurs by virtue of an incoming consciousness during a reverse substitution who has already acquiesced and expressed the impulse, forging an emotional coupling relationship with respect to that impulse. It is through this phase linking between adjacent structure members that the impulse reoccurs after the conclusion of the reverse substitution event. In the case of a negational cycle, it is not recurrence which is desirable, but rather regularity, produced by expression without integration within the substitution event. Thus, the substitution event delays the phase flip until after the termination of the event. The regularity of these substitution events determines the regularity of the cycle. But the above does not mean that both affirmational and negational cycles are expressed only in those form of substitution event. A substitution event simpliciter can be terminated by the expression of the sexual cycle due to the integration of the arousal, just as a reverse substitution event can be initiated by the flipping of the hunger cycle, eating, at the beginning of the reverse substitution event. The closing or opening of either form of substitution event occurs by way of expression of the negated impulse. Any cycle can generate either form of substitution event, but regularity in each cycle is determined by their association with a particular kind. That's the end of the podcast for today.